What is up, everybody? Week number 5 of the Northern Lakes League weekly podcast. And you can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us on Spotify. You can catch us on Pandora. You can catch us on any podcasting platform, pretty much. Did we at least get Apple solved? Where are we at on that?
No, we're still waiting on Apple there.
Apple.
I don't know what's going on here.
We're going to have to put a call into Tim Cook at some point here. Or as our favorite president would say, Tim Apple. But anyway, welcome in week number 5. Really excited. A big show tonight. We've got Chad Long, Fremont Ross, head coach. We're going to talk with him in about 5 minutes or so. Appreciate him because he has a busy night Wednesdays with the media. They do a show in Fremont, so he's always great with giving us a little bit of time. Then about 7:35-ish, we're going to talk with Steve Hardy, the head football coach of the Southview Cougars. Can't wait to talk with him. He's a fun guy to talk to as well. His team, not where they want to be, but if you think about where they were at this time a year ago, about the same spot, maybe a little bit more experience in certain positions, but for the most part, you look at where this Southview team is at and everything's still right in front of them. And that was funny because that was the one thing that I talked about with a couple of guys on the soccer side this week. As I said, how much does having that conference or that division chase kind of on the horizon help with keeping guys engaged, especially when you're not playing well against the other division teams? Every coach to a man has said it's huge. It's huge to have this opportunity to be able to have that. John Gallius said as much to us a couple weeks ago. Sean Kiss said as much to us. And I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of the divisions when they first came out because it felt like you're kind of watering down stuff a little bit, I guess was maybe the way I looked at it, and doesn't mean as much. But every one of those guys has said that Cardinal division title chase keeps everybody engaged, keeps everyone interested. And that's something that I think has really stood out to me throughout the entire 2-year, I guess almost into the second year of the NLL run, is how much that second division has helped keep teams that most years may not have been engaged at this point to keep them engaged into the season.
And I think, you know what, honestly, you could probably draw a parallel to getting into conference play when it comes to college football, as everyone is it's about to do this week or so. And when coaches say it all the time, and I'm sure it's almost a worn out trope now, but we're 0-0, and next week the season begins. And I think everybody, but like I said, it sounds like a cliche, but mentally that's an important thing to be able to hit that reset button and go, okay, let's refocus. And here's the next, let's focus on this game and this, and then move one at a time, because this is the part of the season that we want to focus on here. So,
yeah, again, it's one of those things that in years past, old conferences, you may not have had this, but we do have now. And before we get to our first guest, want to thank one of our sponsors for the podcast, and that is Car Stereo One. Car Stereo One is your number one place in the Glass City. They specialize for providing high-quality audio systems, speakers, and accessories for your vehicle. Their wide open range of products and expert advice, they can help you upgrade your car's sound system, enhance your driving experience. They also do remote starters, window tints, custom interiors. They can work on your bike or your boat, speakers and subwoofers, vehicle wraps. They do custom wheel packages. Basically, anything you could possibly want is there for you at Car Stereo One. So again, check them out at their location, 3120 Central Avenue in Toledo. You can call them 419-474-5553 or online at carstereo1.com. So let's get to our first guest of the evening, and he is joining us from his vehicle tonight. It is one of my favorite people, Chad Long, the head coach of the Fremont Ross Little Giants. Chad, thanks so much for doing this tonight, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
I wanted to talk to you about your team because I know that when you and I have talked in the past, I've always felt like Fremont is that special place in a way, because when you took over there, and you and I talked about this when you had that group of freshmen that ended up graduating with maybe one of the best runs in 4 years at Fremont Ross, that it's that small town but still has that city feel to it. And I know that it wasn't where you grew up necessarily, but how much have you fallen in love with the city of Fremont? Because in so many ways, it kind of the people, I think just the attitude, the culture in the town just gets under your skin a little bit.
Well, I mean, I love it. It was the best move I've ever made in my life. Obviously, bringing the family to Fremont. It's the culture here. It's a bigger town than normally we live. Prior to that in Tiffin, and that has a college atmosphere. But Fremont's just such a beautiful town. A lot of support in all sports, win or lose. They're always going to be there to support the kids. And, that's one of the really cool things about Fremont is, we stress ourselves on academics first and athletics second. And a lot of people will be like, what do you mean? But it's the truth. And that's what we believe by with our school. And, so a lot of parents are rallying around the kids. A lot of the kids here come from one parent household.
Sure.
And these kids love you like a dad. And they love the coaches and they respect the coaches. And then this is one of the best jobs you can have in Northwest Ohio. When I first got hired, that's what I believed. And it's living up to its toll. It's challenging at times, but it's also a joy at times to see kids succeed.
Well, and the cool thing about the stadium there too is win or lose, you guys always have a full home side. I mean, the other night, and I'm sure you would agree, not the ideal start that you would have liked to have gotten off to this season, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. But I mean, you were at least 2/3, 3/4 full on Friday. People are engaged. Yeah. The town's still engaged. And that has to be nice to know that, again, you're not going to have a great season every year. That's just the nature of a public school setting. To be able to have those people still support you is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's we've been through a bear of a schedule, to be honest with you, with the teams that we face thus far. And the stadium is very unique. If you haven't been there, I know you have, but if others haven't, it's beautiful. It's right in the middle of a bunch of houses. You got a huge home side, and we just renovated the visitor side, and the visitor side looks beautiful, along with the concessions and locker room back there. But we always have loyal support, from the community. They always come out, and that's what Fremont's about, is football. And you got to win and you got to be successful, and the crowds are continue getting bigger and bigger as you succeed and move on in this season.
Well, if Ken Winters could have left a Yelp review for the away locker room, he would have left a 5-star. They raved about it on the way back on Friday, so they were pretty excited about that. Let's talk about your team. I know last weekend we didn't get to see him, but all I heard going into the game last week was number 5, who's Zaylen Harris, is really special. He's really special. Again, I know we didn't get to see him last week, but what does he bring to the table for you guys offensively?
A lot. Explosive player who can make plays with his feet or out of the backfield catching the ball. He's also a really good linebacker for us. He is our heart and soul of the team. And unfortunately, he's dealing with an ankle sprain. We're not going to have him this week either, but hopefully to get him back when we get in the conference play in the Cardinal division. And it's a dynamic kid. We're definitely missing on the offensive side, and actually even on the defensive side. He's a special kid. He's about 170 pounds, but he plays a lot heavier than that, and he's fast.
That was what everybody said stood out to him when you watch him on film, was just the speed that he had and that quick first step when he got the ball running it, just be able to hit the hole. And if you weren't there to get a piece of him, he was going to be gone. So, I mean, when you lose someone like that, it becomes difficult, obviously, to replace him. But the one thing that I certainly talked about last Friday as well, I thought Elijah Esquire really, for the situation he's pressed into, obviously he's not Zaylen, but I thought he ran the ball hard. That's not obviously the guy that you always would like out there, but he plays hard. He gives you what he can. And I thought in that game, knowing that it was going to be tough, he did everything he could, I thought, to help you guys win.
Yeah, Elijah Ezagary is actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. We always liked it as a 1-2 punch. So we started Zaylen always with the game, and then Elijah comes in. Elijah's so patient as a running back. he reads his blocks, he takes his time, and then hits it. He's not going to break any huge runs or anything like that, but he's very patient and he lets his linemen do the work. Again, missing Zaylen. I know Elijah wish Zaylen was there, and he's totally 100% fine with coming in right after Zaylen goes out. But Elijah does a lot blocking as well as catching the ball out of the backfield. So he's Elijah did a really good job and filling in and taking on the main role in the absence of Zaylen, so far.
When you talk about blocking, gosh, you've got a lot of size up front. I guess that's a nice way to put it. Caden Miley obviously is a guy that everybody's talked about. Committed to Kent State, had MAC offers a few years ago, but there's other guys on that line that are just really big. Is it fair to say it's probably the biggest line you've had in your time at Fremont?
Yeah, I would say we average, with everyone healthy and playing, 291 on the offensive line. I think what's going to be on the radar next is Cole Myers. He's a junior. He's 6'4", 325. He's a guard for us, and he's the stud of the linemen. And I firmly believe that he's our best lineman that we have right now. And that's not excluding, Xavier Lopez, who's our center right now, who was all conference last year. So we got a lot of experience. We just got to do a better job maintaining our drives on offensive side and get some points on the board. But, we can always hold on to running the ball behind those guys. But now what we're seeing is, because we're not really passing the ball a lot, they're loading the box. So it's even making it harder for our linemen right now and our running backs.
Well, and you have a time too when you get guys that are that size. It's not always the easiest to get guys who are that size to work on the fundamental pieces, the technique, the footwork, the hand placement, all that different stuff. And that's the challenge of a guy like Caden might find, is if he doesn't work on those things, and I'm sure you guys challenge him, but when you get to college next year, everybody is 6'2" and 305. I mean, that's just the way the college game is.
Yeah.
Talk about kind of working with those guys. I know your offensive front is always is a strength, but working with those guys to make sure that they don't just rely on the fact that they're big and that's how they block.
Well, I have two offensive line coaches, Josh Smith, he's an alum from Fremont Ross, and Scott Nicely, who used to be a head coach at Toledo St. Francis. Mm-hmm. He's been at Ashtabula. He's been at St. Joe. They do a very good job working those guys under, with the sleds, under the chutes, and keeping leverage, proper steps, using their hands, and driving. We're more a zone team, so it's a lot of steps and hand placement and move your feet when you're going. So it's tough. It's very technical. People sitting in the stands don't understand you got to have all five work together at one time, especially us being a zone team, to make sure we can get a good play out of it. And then you got to look at double teams up to linebackers, and it's very technical. And I think the two coaches that I mentioned have done an excellent job thus far, with working with what we got. Yeah.
Chad, I know that when I listened to, you had done an interview that I heard early in the season before the first game against Tiffin Columbia, and you were a defensive guy, but from what I understand from that interview, you are calling offensive plays this year. How has that transition gone for you? Because I'm sure it's a different animal to go from one side of the ball to the other and also call plays on top of it.
Yeah, well, I enjoy it, actually. It kind of brought me back to my younger years, and it's nice. I can manipulate a defense, but we got to execute. We got to be able to hit open. I mean, we're pretty spot on. Having Scott Nicely is a great, offensive minded guy, and he's in the box, and I'm communicating with him. And then our old offensive coordinator, Eddie Baptista, is back, and he's the guy that sees the passing game. Scott Nicely sees the running game. It makes it easy for me. But we're not executing.
Sure.
We had many open kids for passing that we need to get the ball out and get to. If we can create a passing game that opens the run game. If we create a run game, it's going to force us to have to pass the ball. We got to be able to do both. So it is frustrating from time to time because things are there. We just got to execute. And I enjoy it. I love being on the offensive side. I bring a lot of organization to that side of the ball, where we've always had to do that on the defense, and how to install what we want to do and why we're doing it, and don't deviate from it, and just stay the course, and just have these guys get more and more confident. As the season continues, you'll see a lot of more explosive plays that'll happen.
You mentioned the passing game. Carson Cadens, your quarterback, he was a starter last year, is back for his senior year. Younger receivers this season, you brought some guys that were in the secondary over to play receiver. Big guys, big targets. What do they have to do to be able to execute better?
Well, they got to, first off, catch the ball, going through them. But honestly, blocking. They got to be able to block. They got to be able to block as well as catch the ball. Those are the two big things we've been really focusing on the last 2 weeks, now going on 3 weeks, is we got to be the whole package. We got to be able to use the length of Mason England. He's 6'2". We got to be able to get the ball. He has to catch the ball and go get it at the highest point. Same with Jackson Mackey, who we've been using a little bit at receiver, but also at tight end. So these guys just got to step up and start making plays themselves, and get us on course to get another win.
I look at the NLL, and we were talking about it right before you came on, and I was saying about the different divisions. And I know when we've talked about the old Three Rivers Athletic Conference, the biggest problem I think a lot of people felt was outside of Central and Whitmer. Once that game was done, the conference was pretty much decided. That was historically true every year. And it probably was hard for you guys, especially if you weren't in that conversation, unless there was some kind of playoff berth on the line to keep kids engaged. Now that you've got that division chase, and you just talked about it a few moments ago, of considering, holding a guy like Zaylen out for another week, not intentionally necessarily, but the goal is to win that division, not necessarily beat those crossover teams. How much does having that division chase help keep the kids focused and engaged in the season?
Well, I mean, it's nice. Before, like you said, you're playing, you have to beat Central Catholic, which doesn't happen very often.
Mm-hmm.
And Whitmer. It's nice being in the Cardinal division, but we got to survive the crossover games.
Right.
I have always said, this being in this conference, which is a classy, very good conference, big and small. There's really good teams in there, and anyone can beat anyone. But you got to be healthy.
Yeah.
It's got to be healthy for when you actually get in the league. And for us, our league is the Cardinal division. Should we be playing teams like Perrysburg, Whitmer? I don't know. They're bigger than us. It's hard. Just got to mentally keep the kids focused and say, hey, there's bigger picture. We're still playing for a comp. But again, you also got to stay healthy through it. But it's nice, and it doesn't get easy, because once we start the Cardinal division, we're going to be playing against Napoleon, who in my mind is the favorite to win the Cardinal division. And then I believe we turn around and play Clay, then Southview. So we get all the tough ones right off the rip in the Cardinal division. But again, health is the key. And, hopefully we're healthy by that time when we go against Napoleon.
Well, you referenced Napoleon. They're the perfect example of being able to keep a team engaged, because they come into division play last year, hadn't won a game yet. They're 0-5, and then all of a sudden they rip 4 off and are in the conversation to possibly win that league title at the end of the year. It really does go to show you that you can lock in at the right time. You don't have to be playing your best football week 1, but as long as you're playing your best football week 6 and beyond, you've got a good shot at winning that division.
Yeah, I mean, it's about surviving and clicking. And if you can click at the right time, you could be a dangerous team. And Napoleon is a fine example of that. They were on fire. They went through us pretty good, and they're a physical team, and you can never overlook anybody that you play. And that just tells you the depth of our conference and what can happen week in, week out. If you're not healthy, or if you have a bad game, you lose. And then you could possibly be out of the conference title.
I wanted to ask you about somebody that I know was pretty special to you, and you had mentioned, and the reason it stuck out to me was because in a previous life I worked with Ohio State football, and this gentleman had an impact on the team that won the national championship in 2002. But when I asked you in back in 2022, I said, talk about your staff, and I don't think you made it 5 seconds before you talked about this guy. Tom Kaiser was a guy that was maybe one of the most giving, one of the best guys that has ever been in that Fremont community. And you had said at the time, I remember you had said basically, like, we are so happy to have him back, not just because he's a good football coach, but he's an even better person. First off, what did he mean to your program, and how much is he missed right now?
Uh, he meant everything, not only to the program, but to myself. That was my right-hand man. You're talking a guy with knowledge, a guy that can pace you, keep calm you, anything. He's been through it. He's been all over to many programs, even at Ohio State, he's very well loved at Ohio State. Um, he's just a guy, very generous guy, a guy that has, we need something, he gets it, that type of guy. But the kids loved him. He had a personality about him. I miss him. I still think about him there's not a week that goes by that I don't think of TK, is what we call him. And, we still do a lot of things in the off season, and we name it TK because that's installed with the program. You were getting a whole package out of that guy. And we were very lucky and fortunate enough to have him for the time that we did. And, it's tough on the kids. The kids still remember him. They know how genuine he was and how he loved them. He was hard on them, but he loved them. And, we still had his two grandsons. Dominic Brown graduated this last year, who was a state in the shot put. And then Tyrese Brown is currently on the team and playing. So, I look at Ty and I like, man, your papa would be so happy right now and what you're doing. Or, it's just their mom, Shelly Kaiser, is still involved with the Feed the Team parents, and just a great family, a great man, loved his family, loved his grandkids, and he's truly missed. And I truly, truly miss him a lot. And I just, sometimes I hear the talking, the whispers, and I always think it's him, talking down to us and telling us what we do. Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, like I said, he was the guy that and that 2022 team, that's the last year that you guys had that really good class. And I remember asking, who's the guy that you lean on, and I don't think I even got the question out before you went to Tom. And I was sad to hear that he had passed away. I met up with Coach Tress a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about him, and he said, he passed away, and I had no idea. So wanted to make sure I mentioned him, because I know, like I said, how special he was to you just in the short conversation we had about him before, and then also knowing how much of a fixture he was in the Fremont area and in that, I guess, eastern Ohio area of Northwest Ohio.
Yeah, I appreciate it. He's a man that would never be forgotten ever here at Fremont. Yeah, it's a sad thing, but lots of stories we can tell about TK.
When I say 9th season, does it feel like it's been 9 years?
To be honest with you, no. I enjoy coaching football, and when that time comes when I don't enjoy it, is the time I just need to walk away. 9 years, yeah. I ask my coaches every year, how many years have I been head coach? It's beyond just football. That we're doing here at Fremont. We're sending kids to go to college. So, you got Bryson Hammer returning punts right now for Toledo, doing really, really well, being very successful. You got Caden Holmes, who's a nickelback at Toledo, doing really, really well. And again, working on their academics. You got kids like Dontrez Brown, that's playing at Bowling Green. To be able to see these guys go on to be educated, but also be able to play the game they love. And there's numerous other kids. To me, that's success. That's what it's about. It's just not about wins and losses of, being 10-0 at Fremont Ross. There's a lot bigger things that we need to worry about with our kids. We need to be father figures and everything else. And I love it and I enjoy it. And I'm really close with a lot of the family members and community here. And, when it is my time to leave, I would be happy. I would be full hearted with it and what's best for the program at that point.
You mentioned some of those kids like Caden and Bryson. Have you been able to go and watch them at all? I know season kind of keeps you busy, but have you gotten a chance to go watch them at all?
Not this year. It's more last year. I got to see Bryson. He didn't play, but the BG Toledo game, that's a big one. That was at the Dwight Perry Stadium. So I got to go to that game. I did get to go to another game of Toledo's. This year I have not got to see either Dontrez nor Caden or Bryson play, but I do plan on going to watch some games. Yes, it's just they've been on the road, playing.
Sure.
And haven't been able to connect with them yet, but definitely will be.
When you go into the Glass Bowl, is it hard for you? Because a lot of people don't know that you played football at Bowling Green, and I'm sure those old habits die hard when you walk in over at the Glass Bowl.
Yeah, especially when we have to play St. Francis there. I hate this place. But to be honest with you, I'm an alum from BG, and I always love BG, but I am really truly closer with the Toledo coaching staff.
Okay.
Than I am the BG coaching staff. And it's kind of bizarre for me to say that, but it's the truth. There's a great coaching staff at Toledo, and obviously they're doing wonders with that program and what Coach Candle is doing. And, the funny thing is Coach Candles came in and visited last year. They were trying to get Caden Miley, and he's like, I know you don't really like me, Coach. I go, Coach, actually, I'm a fan of the Rockets,
Yeah.
and I do root for them every game but one. So, and he got a chuckle out of that. And, we had our chances this last year of beating them and pulling the upset, but kind of fell apart at the end. So, but it don't bother me. My playing days were done a long time ago, and I just root for my boys now.
Let's get into this game against Findlay this weekend. You mentioned injuries, being healthy. They are certainly not in that boat either. They know a little bit of what you're dealing with. The interesting thing, though, is it hasn't been the quarterback play that suffered. It's kind of been the defense that has maybe given up more yards than people think. Having watched them on tape, I'm sure you're impressed with Landon Eckelberry, the freshman, the quarterback, but what are some of the keys, do you think, going into this Friday against Findlay?
First, I want to say that, when I heard about Montgomery,
I know,
and being done, that broke my heart. That's such a great kid, a great family, great sportsmanship, just unbelievable, kid. And it was sad. And then I hear about the freshman and Eckelberry, and, he just threw for 567 yards or something like that. The key is not give up big plays against Findlay. On the defensive side, we can't give up any big plays. They're going to find ways. They're going to throw fades. They're going to slip you. They're going to do a bunch of different type of things. So on defense, rally to the ball. Don't give up the big plays and create plays when we can. And it's going to, ultimately be done by our defensive line. Our defensive line has to get pressure on the freshmen. They'll go 5 wide and throw the ball around, and they will run the ball. On the offensive side for Fremont, we got to be able to run the ball and be able to throw the ball when we can. So, it's Clay put up some big numbers against them. You're right on your outlook. Their defense has been the weakness of that team. It hasn't been the offense. The offense is still very productive, even with the freshman quarterback. They have a lot of kids stepping up and doing a great job, but the defense, they're weak in many areas, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to exploit those and be able to run the ball and throw the ball and keep them kind of off balance. So,
well, and I'm sure coming off of the game last week, not that you necessarily replicate what Clay did, and certainly you don't have the personnel to necessarily do that, but it's one of those things where when you see a team kind of exploit the other team's defense, it's obviously easy to say it, much harder to execute it, but they at least you can see like they're not the big bad Fremont that we saw a year ago, and that team kind of came out of nowhere in some ways to dominate, but you see the yardage given up passing. It's kind of eye popping how many yards they've given up.
Yeah, it's shocking, to be honest with you. I'm like, whoa, are we watching the same film, and so forth, because this is technically my 12th year at Fremont, and I'd be the first to say this ain't the Findlay team we are normally used to seeing, especially on the defensive side, because they've always prided themselves on defense. And, I'm sure they're going to have a great game plan against us, but I will say Clay runs a lot of the same formations, a lot of the same things we have done, but we don't have a quarterback like Heschel. So
not many people do.
No, not too many people do. And I can't, to be honest with you, I love watching that kid. That we've had to deal with him for 4 years, but just like Montgomery, we're okay when those two leave. So
you hit it on the head, because Mason, I don't know what it is and I felt like after they played Whitmer last year was when he got the Toledo offer. And since then, it's been like a straight arrow pointed upward. I don't think I've been more entertained. And even when you look at the final score with Whitmer, it's 45-14, but really could have been a lot closer because he was making plays where you just could not believe how he completed passes. It's incredible the growth that kid's had in 4 years.
I can believe everything. That kid is the best dance around and make kids miss on sacks like no other. And then he can take off and run. Without him, I don't know how good Clay would be. That's how quarterback he is. And, he'll be missed. He'll always be talked about, because of the success that he was able to do this year. And same with Montgomery. They're both two classy, great kids that compete at the highest level. And you're right, the score could have been way worse, and Clay kind of backed down a little bit and started running the ball a little more.
Well, we'll let you go. I do appreciate the time. You've heard me say it before, but you're always one of my favorite people to talk to in this conference, because you and I had a lot of conversations a few years ago. I felt like every game I had you guys, it seemed like a couple of years ago. So I appreciate you doing this. And for your sake, I hope next time we talk, we're talking about a win down in Findlay this weekend.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's always great talking to you, and hopefully we'll get that win down in Findlay.
All right. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate the time. That was Chad Long, the head football coach of the Fremont Ross Little Giants. Again, his team taking on Findlay this weekend down in Hancock County. So we appreciate his time. Best of luck to him always. As I said, one of my favorite people to chat with throughout the football season. Just one of those great coaches. We got a ton of great coaches in the Northern Lakes League, if I'm being honest. I don't think we've had one yet where we've talked to where we don't come away and like, man, it's fun talking to that individual. So, well, I'm going to go to my second sponsorship read because our second guest is already here. So Victory Auto Mall is your trusted used car dealer in Toledo, Ohio. Whether you're shopping for your first car or your 10th truck, their staff provides outstanding service in a no-pressure environment. Their only goal to find you a great vehicle that matches your lifestyle and service you well for years to come. Victory Auto Mall is an established exemplary reputation in the community, and they are a buy here, pay here dealership. Top priority is helping you get the vehicle you want. You can check them out online. We finance cars today, or you can give them a call, 419-345-3603, and visit them 1632 West Lasky Road. So thank you to Victory Auto Mall. And let's bring in our second guest, another guy I like talking to, and that is the head coach of the Southview Cougars, Steve Hardy. Steve, thanks for joining us tonight.
No problem. Good to be here, Chris.
I look at this group, I look at your team, and it's funny because I think a lot of people look at the situation you're in, and I look at it, and I think people are surprised maybe that some of the scores, but really this is kind of where you guys were a year ago, and you and I talked about this is not necessarily about how you play in the crossover games. Obviously, you'd like the score to be closer if you could help it, but it's all about that back half, that Cardinal Division title. First off, what did it mean to win that inaugural one last year?
Well, I mean, it was awesome. Obviously, with the class we had and the expectations that we had with that group, that was one of our goals, was to win that. Obviously, we wish to perform a little better in those crossover games last year. Last year, if you look at it, we kind of progressed each week. Finley was pretty rough last year, and then Perrysburg, we shot ourselves in the foot a couple times with some special teams and some turnovers. And then, you remember the Whitmer game last year.
You gave us a scare for sure.
Came down to the wire there, and that was one of those, that last minute of that game has gone through my mind probably 1,000 times in slow motion. But, like you mentioned, that doesn't impact any of our goals really these last 3 weeks or the last 2 weeks and this week, because we can still win a league title. Last year, we still hosted 2 home playoff games with a 7-3 record. We still got to beat our rival week 1. So, all those goals that we have at the beginning of the year are intact. And the biggest issue going into these 3 games back to back to back is, those are rough games. And if you come out of it 2-3, you're coming on a 3-game losing streak. Where's your team's head at? Where's their hearts at? You're getting into, week 5, 6 of the school year. How far behind are they in their schoolwork? What's going on at home? So it's a hard part of the season for everybody, but coming at it with those 3 games in a row, it's tough. And, this year our numbers are much lower than last year. We graduated a class of 30 kids, close to 30 kids. You're losing a lot, and, you lose a couple every year. So, our team now, JV to varsity, we're looking at like 54. We're dealing with a lot of injuries right now. We've been practicing with about 45. So that's tough, and you can't really do all the things you did last year in practice when you have 30 less guys. So it's challenging from a coaching standpoint. It's challenging from a player standpoint. And, we just got to keep focusing on getting better. And, I think if you would ask me on Monday how we were looking this week, it was pretty rocky because we had about 40 kids at practice. But, we got some back every day, and the enthusiasm got bigger. Today we had our swag order came in. So all of our shorts and t-shirts came in. So, and we got some good news out of a player who got hurt last week, hurt his knee. Turns out there's no structural damage. So he'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks. So, looking at any positive thing we can really grasp on right now in the middle of these 2 losses in a row, and another big one on Friday.
You mentioned losing 30 seniors, but it's not just the play. It's that leadership in the locker room. It's that steady hand at the wheel. I mean, you guys had some guys who had been through it, who pretty much since you had taken over as head coach have kind of progressed along with you through learning to be a head coach and all those that progression. And really it felt like it peaked last year at the right time with everybody kind of coming together at that right time. But when you lose that, it's not just the athletic play. It's how do you replace all that off the field stuff too?
Right. And the experience. I mean, like you said, so this is my 3rd year. That group was sophomores the year before I got hired, and I was the offensive coordinator. And a lot of those guys on that very young team were starting. So they ended up starting 3 years in a row, and that experience and all of that. I think this year our kids transitioned well, because that's what we were focusing on the last 2 years is we're developing a program. We're not developing a team. And a program has a good freshman group, has a good JV group, has a good varsity group. And so that's what we've been stressing the last 2 years, and we've had success at all 3 levels the last 2 years. Now this year we have that first season where those JV kids are now transitioning to varsity, and you'll find 6 or 7 of them moving into first year starting positions you wouldn't even guess they hadn't started. And so that's great. Now the toll it's had on our JV, we've had to cancel the last 2 weeks of JV because we just don't have the numbers, especially in some key positions. Not so much linemen, which is usually the case when we're talking about this. It's more like the quarterback. Do we have a quarterback? Our JV got injured. Turns out to be not as severe as we thought, so he'll be back. But are we going to start a freshman or let the freshman play with the freshman class?
Right.
So some hard choices for a lot of those kids because you cancel a JV game, and that's 30 kids that aren't getting experience, and that's needed for next year. So that scares me, but you can't go into a game against a Division I JV team even without a quality quarterback that knows what he's doing. So the experience, I think we've been pleasantly surprised by a lot of the guys that we had to put in there, especially at the wide receiver spot, at the DB spot, and obviously at running back, replacing Isaac Sexton with Mo MacArthur, who's done an outstanding job so far this year, and we expect great things for the next year and a half. Now, leadership, last year on that senior-led team, it was junior Drew Young who was our vocal leader. And so going into this year, we had that voice up until a couple weeks ago, where we had that. So that consistency was there, and that was great. You know, him going down with a season-ending injury just breaks all of our hearts, and we all were kind of standing there, you know, that was a rough one. And then, I'm sure Finley dealt with that too. And I talked to Coach Adams about that, and we kind of exchanged some quality advice on what to do and how to move forward. And we have some other kids stepping up into those roles, and we're getting there day by day.
You mentioned good quarterback play, and that is definitely something that you've had with Will Mays under center. Jim obviously is a coach on the team. The field's named after him now, but Will has been kind of a steady hand at the wheel for that offense the last few years. And I know when you look at the numbers, again, in a way, it's sort of because you're kind of breaking in some new receivers, but he just showed how good he was last year. When he's got guys to throw to, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the area, in my opinion.
Right. And you can see that when we lost him, in the Scott game last year, and he didn't.
That's right.
For 3.5 games. He came back kind of a little bit in our last game of the season, then played the 2 playoff games. So, he's really excited going into this year, especially this part of the season, because he never got to play in a Cardinal Division game. So, all those games were pretty much 90% run the ball, and we were still able to beat teams when they knew that's what we were trying to do. Will's been great. I mean, we have some quality receivers in those spots. Each one's a little different. We got Mason Brott, who's a precision guy running great routes, willing to block. He's a senior who's worked his way up through the whole progression and gotten better every year. And he was given a chance this year, and he hasn't let go of his position. He's done great. We got Adam LaPlace, who's a 2-way starter for us, and he's, he'll be a starter on the basketball team. He's one of the best baseball players in the area too. So he's a 3-sport athlete that's just super athletic, doesn't say a word and just goes to work every day. And, he's been really great in a lot of ways. And then Dalen Selman, who's getting a lot of the stats right now, stepping into Emmett Lamb's position of last year. Not as big as Emmett, not as, top end speed, I don't think, but he checks a lot of the boxes, and he's coachable, and he works his butt off every day. And he's another 3-sport athlete. So, I mean, you get 3-sport athletes in there, and whether they're a first-year starter or not, if they're a senior, they've had challenges in the past. They've been put in pressure situations, so they're able to do it. And we're at week 5, so they're not really new starters anymore. I mean, through 2 scrimmages and everything we go through 4 weeks, especially in these D1 teams, you're facing really good opponents. So they've done a great job. But Will, I mean, he can run the ball. He wins every sprint every day that we run. All year round, so he can run the ball, throw the ball. We give him a lot of flexibility in what we do in every play. He's got the ability to change the play pretty much all the time, unless we lock him down. And he does a good job with that. I mean, there's times where we wish he'd open it up a little more, but
sure.
You play a team like Perrysburg, and they lock everything down. I mean,
yeah.
They are a robot out there, and Coach Ward does a tremendous job with taking away what you're trying to do. And we give him 2 options and neither one's there. He's like, I just got to run the play, coach. Nothing I can do. And so, you have those challenges along the way, but he continues to improve, and he's got a preferred walk-on to UT, which he's really excited about. And he doesn't know what position they're going to have him play, but he's willing to do whatever he can to get on the field there.
Mentioned Mo MacArthur. When you have to replace the all-time leading rusher in school history, it takes a special guy to be able to do that. And you guys identified Mo pretty early on in the process of this is the guy. I don't know if it was last year or if it was this year, but it was pretty set right away whenever you made that decision that we feel he can be really special. He's a different kind of back than what Isaac was, but man, he could be one of those guys just with his size. I know he played linebacker for you guys last year, but just the physicality that he brings to that position is such a weapon for you guys.
Yeah, we knew probably early on last year that was the role that he was going to play. And so, being the running back coach, I really put a lot on him and Isaac all year to spend as much time together as possible and learn from each other and push each other and all those sorts of things. And you could see in JV games last year, Mo was just moving at a different speed than everybody else. And then we moved him up to be a varsity starter at linebacker last year as a sophomore on that senior driven team. And he, beat out 2 seniors to start at that linebacker position and did a great job. So we really haven't found his footing on defense right now. It's kind of, where do you put your starting
Sure.
running back on defense? And at the beginning of the year, we had him at safety, and then we moved him back into linebacker. And, we've just kind of been maybe a little protective of him at times. We were the same way with Isaac. He didn't play much defense, but when he did, he made a play, especially in a big game against BG. But no, yeah, Mo's a different type of back. Like he said, he's a lot bigger than Isaac was. Isaac hit the weight room a little harder and maybe had more top end speed, but there's things that Mo does that you can't coach. And we just try to point him in the right direction, make sure he's working on his footwork and making sure he's making the right steps on each play that we have. But a lot of it's just him being him, and another kid like LaPla that's just quiet and goes to work. I mean, maybe a perfect person to take over for Isaac. He doesn't let any of that stuff get to him. Another, like I said, 3-sport athlete. He plays basketball and runs track too. And so he's just that even-keeled guy who doesn't get too excited or anything, doesn't show any pain, doesn't show any being tired. He just goes. And so that's perfect for this offense, where you got Will being more the vocal guy, and you got some receivers who kind of are vocal, and you got some senior linemen who like to talk a lot. It's nice to have Mo back there just plugging away, and you give him a seam, he'll take it.
Is Coach Springs giving you any kind of, fee for all the training? I mean, everybody seems to be a starter on the basketball team. It doesn't seem fair that nobody's giving them to you in football shape, but you're giving it to him ready to play basketball.
Hey, there's a couple other that I talk to every day on that basketball team. Some of the bigger guys inside, and I'm saying, I got a helmet for you, man. If you catch touchdowns, you don't get tackled. So no, we have a great relationship, and with Coach McCarthy, the baseball coach too. The three of us, we all encourage all players to play as many sports as possible. And I don't know. I know a lot of coaches say that and they encourage that, but it is true. I mean, we work together. If there's a kid, we got a kid who said he wants to concentrate on baseball right now, and Coach McCarthy's like, go play football. You're not it's going to make you better. If you're playing baseball year round, your arm's going to be dead by the time you're an upperclassman. Don't do that. Go do something else. And so we all kind of help each other out. And in summer, scheduling's a nightmare, but we work it out and we talk to each other, communicate. And so yeah, but no, the basketball program's definitely headed in the right direction. They definitely got the right guy for that job. And some of his assistants are outstanding, awesome as well. They came out to our 7-on-7. They're at all the games. They're helping out as much as they can. And so, yeah, that balance is good. And I think we got 3 or 4 of the starting 5 on our football team this year. So that'll be exciting.
You better at least put a thank you in the program or something to you come basketball season. I do want to go to that Whitmer game, and I know that that's probably torture to you from a year ago, but that was the game. And you and I had talked about it before, about having teams in that Cardinal division believe or feel like they can compete with those teams in the Buckeye division. And outside of, and no disrespect to Springfield and Northview, outside of those 2 schools, you guys were the closest to pulling off what I would have considered probably the biggest upset of the league schedule last year. Obviously, sans the outcome, did that give your guys confidence going into the Cardinal division schedule, saying, we just played with a team that's the biggest high school in the area. They have the most amount of talent on paper. They got a guy who's going to play Division I college football at tackle. They had other college football players. Did that give your guys a sense of confidence going into those Cardinal division games because you hung with Whitmer for so long?
It did. And there's more to that. I mean, we faced Whitmer at the UT passing tournament and beat him in the, I think, semifinals or quarterfinals of that. And so there was a lot of chirping amongst the players in that game. And there was a lot. So that kind of set the tone, I think, and really being that third game. And last year was a better indicator than this year, that against Finley in the first game, we did very poorly. We lost big, quarterback had a huge night against us in our home field. And we went in that game with a ton of confidence, and we just got beat down.
Yeah.
We left that game with no confidence. And then going to Perrysburg and swinging away. And, we gave an opening kick for a touchdown. We gave 2 pick sixes. I mean, you're spotting them 21 points. And I think we lost by about 28 or so. And, that gives us a little bit of confidence, like, outside of these huge mistakes that we made, we were very competitive, and we were the ones laying the hit, and they were the one wanting to end the game because they were the ones hurting. So that led into that confidence boost, and we had a couple breaks go our way. We had I think a sack in the end zone that led to a touchdown and a turnover right after that. So we really had a lot of momentum in that third into the fourth quarter of that game. And, and then, unfortunately our cornerback falls, making a cut, wide open receiver, and you happen to catch him, if the quarterback's looking the other way, that's not an issue. It's just, a series of unfortunate events that happened after that game. And, leaving that game, everyone was super emotional and, on the brink of making that break in that glass, I guess, ceiling or whatever you want to call it, that Clay finally got to do last week. But that was close for us. And that gave us a lot of confidence going into, we had to play Scott after that. And Scott last year had two guys that
they did. Stars. Yes.
So they made that game interesting in that City League game. But, Isaac pulled away with some big numbers in that game. And that's the game that Will got hurt. So that was kind of we needed that confidence, because if we wouldn't have been at that level and then we lose Will, what are we feeling like going into Bowling Green, who at the time was rolling over everybody, and then we stopped them. I think they had 13 yards rushing for us or something. So we kind of started that poor trend for them to kind of go downhill, but that took a lot. And that Whitmer game really helped us, even though it was a loss, to continue to improve and get better in those next couple of weeks and be a divisional champion.
So I have to ask, because this was one of the things I thought did play into your advantage, was the fact that you guys were one of two. Now it's just Anthony Wayne that had a grass field still. And it was kind of funny because I had asked Ken Winters going into that game, I said, any concern about playing on grass? And it kind of feels like one of those announcer questions that you ask just because I never could. Oh, no. I honestly felt like at times in that game, our kids looked like Bambi on ice, just trying to get footing, because there is a difference. It was a cooler night, if you remember. It got slick out there at certain points. I know you guys switched to turf. Are you a little sad to not have the grass? Obviously, it's a pain to keep up with. I get that. But the fact that you guys had that advantage, I think, and probably played into some things at times.
At times. I mean, obviously the big crown that it had on it helped the most, because if you get to practice on that, throwing those balls to the sideline gets challenging for opposers. And you got guys who are trying to cross field and run over it and trip all the time. So we saw that a lot. The turf is great. I mean, they did a fantastic job putting it in. I wish we could be practicing on it right now. They're installing the track around it right now.
Oh, geez.
And so we've been kicked back off to the grass fields for the last 3 weeks. And we were told that it's supposed to be done this week, but I don't see that happening in the near future. Hopefully it gets done sooner than later. We're still allowed to play there on Fridays, but we had to move our freshmen, our JV games away from there. So that's been a not fun experience. But for practice reasons, the turf is awesome. You can just walk right outside of the locker room and you're there, and you can having the lines permanently there and all of that stuff makes practice so much more convenient. I haven't noticed that it would make a huge difference as far as a competitive advantage, maybe a play or two a game where people just aren't used to it. But it's grass, it's football. I mean, it's not that big of a different challenge if you use that as an excuse. I don't know. I don't think we've played at Anthony Wayne enough where they do a pretty good job with their turf. And I'll tell you this, in my 6 years here before we got the turf, that grass was the best it's ever looked. I mean, it was near perfect shape. We got some new groundskeepers, and they were doing some things, over the course of the last 2 seasons before they ripped it up, that it was in the best shape that we've ever had it. So it's been nice, but you got to get with the times, and it was a huge project for the school district to do that, and the renovations they made at Northview too. So it helps our community as a whole get better. And it's really helpful, and it'll be helpful for some of the other sports too, like lacrosse is going to use it. Soccer still, we have a very nice soccer grass field, so the soccer is still going to use that game field, but they have an opportunity sometimes to practice on it if they're going to play a game on the road on turf. So overall, it's been a great experience. And yes, I'm old school. I would love to play games on grass. If they would have asked me what my choice would be, it would be to have a turf practice field and keep the grass, but I don't think anyone was going to pay for that. But no, it's a beautiful facility, and getting to have it named with Coach Mays is still out there with us has been just a great experience. And every second we get with him is outstanding. And he's very appreciative of it. And we had the naming ceremony against Waite, and it was a great experience for him, and a bunch of old players and coaches and friends and family were in town. And it was a great event.
How big is it to have the linkage that you have between Jim and then like Sean Joplin's on the staff, and there's, I'm sure, other guys that were a part of those glory years when Coach Mays took them on those state title runs. How critical is it to have those guys there to kind of just help the guys that are there say it's possible to get to that level here? I mean, we're living proof, walking proof that it can be done. Does that give the guys a little bit of a jolt at times to maybe understand it's not impossible to get to the state championship level?
Well, yeah, we're surrounded by history. I mean, you go in our locker room, we have a banner for every NLL championship and every other accolade, and there's a picture on the wall of every NLL champion that's ever been through there. So our locker room is riddled with all of that history. And you see newspaper articles from Blade Players of the Year, and then you see that guy in the locker room talking to you, and
right.
You see the coach talking to you, and you see the rings on guys' fingers, and you see that stuff, and that you feel that. Even as a coach, you feel that, and it motivates you at times. And last week we talked about why we do what we do. Whether you're a player or a coach and you're sacrificing things every day, but what's your why? And, if you need to find one in that moment where you're tired or you're down or whatever, you need something to motivate you. We're surrounded by guys who have been down and up, and so they know how to do that. And, we have some coaches that were around from coaches, his staff, and then we bring some new ones on. We have a couple coaches who played for me. So, when they were freshmen or in JV and stuff like that. So we're surrounded by a ton, and we're always evolving our staff with, we want people to move up and move on and progress and develop. And then we want to bring on new people all the time too.
Before I let you go, would be remiss if I didn't ask you about kind of what you thought some of the keys were for tomorrow, or Friday against Whitmer.
Well, obviously we got to get off the bus. We can't have a slow start.
Yeah.
And, you got to get a stop. Now, what does that mean? Last week, we had a great stop against Perrysburg, their first drive. It was 9 plays. It was rough. We stopped them. They punted, and then we got out there and went 3 and out. And then they had another long drive, and then we went 3 and out. And so, although on one side of the ball we got off the bus, the other side we didn't. But keep in mind that, 6 or 7 of those guys are going both ways. So that's kind of a hard thing. They did really well, but then they were tired going into the offensive series. So managing the game and the time and players who are going both ways and getting them rest where we can is important. But getting stops early and getting on the board early and getting the game into the second half, I think, is key. Because I think our team meshes with a team like Whitmer more so than with Perrysburg, where, if you don't figure it out against Perrysburg, it's hard to come back from that, because if they got you, and they don't let you go. Whereas I think with a team like Whitmer, we're more matched up better, and there's some big plays, but then there's some plays or some areas that we can take advantage of and they can take advantage of, and it's kind of more back and forth. And so that's what we're hoping for. And we have some things planned and to get better this week. And, through the course of the year, you want to do this, and you're holding this for this week or this for that week and moving forward. And so, our game plan is to proceed with our progress of what we wanted to do offensively and defensively each year. And, we've had great meetings over the weekend about, what we're going to do. And then we've gone through it this week, and it's gotten better each day. So our game plan is that. And, if we can get off to a good start, I think we have some guys that can swing with them, and get the game into the second half and see what happens.
Well, you certainly did that a year ago. And again, I think that was one of those moments, in a way, I don't think you guys probably realized too, that in a way that kind of woke Whitmer up too, a little bit going in. I think a lot of people wondered who was going to show up to play Anthony Wayne the next week. And it certainly made that program look at itself in the mirror and go, man, we just got pushed by a school that is not as big as us, that we consider ourselves better than. Again, I know you probably disagree. I thought you guys had a lot of talent last year, but that's one of those things. Like, I think you guys always the one thing I respect about the job that you guys do is you guys never back down from a challenge. And that's one of the things when you and I have talked for other situations that it's very evident that you've never allowed that we're smaller or we're in the Cardinal division thing to kind of stand in the way. I think you've kind of always said, like, we're up for every challenge and we'll go and give you our best shot every week.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the schedule. You got to show up,
Yeah.
so you might as well give it a fight. And we have some big guys that can fight in the trenches, and we got some speed. And one of the things is Southview is a really great school for a lot of reasons, but from top to bottom, it's one of the most diverse schools I've been around. You have so many different people in such a good group, and in the last couple of years, it's really come together well, and the school spirit's at an all-time high. And it's enjoyable to be in the school when I am, and at pep rallies and all of those things. And right now, I think is a really good time for Southview High School as a whole. You see all the other sports doing well too. Basketball won the Cardinal, and track, I think, was runner up in the NLL. So a lot of good things going on at Southview. And so, we're up for anything, and we'll show up Friday and we'll give you the best show we can.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the time. I'll definitely stop down and say hello. I really do. I know I said it to Chad, but I mean it for you too. I love talking with you. It's why I wanted to have you on. I always felt bad we couldn't make it work last year, so I'm glad we could this year. Again, appreciate the time. Best of luck, and I look forward to speaking with you on Friday and shaking your hand.
Yep. See you Friday.
All right. Thanks, Steve. That was Steve Hardy, the head football coach of the Southview Cougars here. Always appreciate that time. Like I said, every one of these guys has been just great to talk with. Appreciate Steve. Appreciate Chad. They always just really great about just giving time and talking about football. I love talking with coaches. And Dan, you get this with you get the pleasure of kind of cutting the audio up and sometimes even being involved with the visiting press conferences with the coaches for UT. And there's something about just being able to have a half hour with a coach, whether it's high school, whether it's college, and just being able to talk and kind of pick their brain and kind of feel what their philosophy is, because in a lot of ways the stuff kind of looks the same, but in so many other ways it's completely different.
Well, and the fun part about that is always getting the perspective of a new coach that you haven't had a chance to talk to, or this perspective of a rivals coach to kind of see where their mindset actually is. And obviously a coach is not going to talk to, the competitors, broadcasters, and be 100% honest, but some are. Some are really engaging. Some dabble in coach speak, and that's what they do. But I mean, if you ever want to, like, both Chad, Steve are great examples of it in the Mid-American Conference. If you ever want to talk to a guy or see a guy talk, who is just a great interview and a great lover of the game and what he's doing, seek out anything from wow, I just went blank. From Coach Chuck Martin down in Miami.
Yeah.
And he is a phenomenal interview and he seems to have no filter, which is kind of fun on our side. But anything that you want to know what he thinks about the game in general or the game that he's dealing with, he doesn't shy away from it. And it's great to hear him and how he looks at a game and compare it to how Coach Candle looks at a game.
Sure.
And compare it to say how, like, Coach McElwain up at Central, they look at a game. And it's the same thing here. It's great to be able to sit down and actually have these coaches, talk about their teams, and not just in the way, which I think is what's great about being able to have them on, is that not just in the way that you expect a football coach to talk about his team, but really talk about all the aspects that come along with being a high school coach. And I think that's the best part about being able to bring him on.
Well, and him talking about the fact that you don't think about a coach having to deal with the fact that they're installing the track at the stadium, and they've got to figure out where to practice and have to figure out where they're going to put the JV and the freshman team.
Right.
You don't think about those pieces, but that's the beauty and kind of the caveats that come with being a high school coach. Is people assume it's practice during the week. You show up on Friday, you maybe watch some film on Saturday, rinse, repeat. It's the same thing. And it's not the case. I guarantee you, if you asked any of the guys we've talked to or the guys that we will talk to the rest of the year, they will all tell you that every day is a new challenge and every day brings something that you weren't expecting to have to deal with or counteract with. And the fact that those things pop up as a head football coach at a high school, just kind of, again, it's the beauty. It kind of, there's a lot of times where you feel really big in the community. And then these are the moments that remind you like, oh yeah, it's still high school kind of thing. So it's kind of funny. Yeah.
And I mean, you know, and we talked about it actually the last 2 weeks on the show, that concept of, you know, you never really, unless you really sit down and think about it, but these coaches having to recruit year round, basically. Yeah. And especially at schools like Bowling Green, like you're talking last week in Napoleon, where you're kind of constantly going, hey, you be in the hallways like, hey, you look like you got some spice. Yeah. You think you could move. Why don't you come out this afternoon?
Yeah, Steve said the same thing. He said there were some guys on the basketball team he would love to have had come out and play football this year. I'll pass the baton over to you. Let's go ahead and preview the Week 5 games that are coming up. Really good slate this weekend. Excited for what we have on tap.
Not only that, we also, as you'll see across the bottom of your screen, if you happen to be listening to this after the fact, sorry, but we'll touch on it briefly as we got the first set of computer rankings after Week 4. Which, by the way, mind-blowing that we're talking about games to get us through the midpoint of the season already.
Yeah, it's one of those that you realize that the first month is already done. Yeah. And it's incredible to think that after last week, we are already done with that first season. It goes by fast. It's funny because there's so much build-up to it. And then before you know it, it's over with. It really does kind of fly by.
We will start off over at Perrysburg, actually, as the undefeated Yellow Jackets welcoming in Clay, who finally picked up that signature win, outlasting Findlay a week ago. But now they have to go on the road to Perrysburg. And as you just heard Steve talk about, is a team that once they get a hold of you, they don't let you go. So how can Clay hold up against that ground and pound style of offense that Perrysburg is going to hit them with?
Well, Mike Ward, I'm sure the defensive coordinator there at Perrysburg is going to have something drawn up. They're certainly not going to allow Mason Heinschild to throw all over. But kind of like we heard Chad Long say earlier in the show, Mason's one of those guys that does not get sacked easily. You and I witnessed it in person a few weeks ago. He is phenomenal escaping the pocket, escaping pressure, and being able to make plays, keep his eyes downfield, make plays on the run. That was the signature win of the John Gallius era at Clay. Hands down, their biggest win in his time there. Thrilled for him because such a great person. We talked to him a couple weeks ago. Have a soft spot for the Eagles because of growing up in Oregon. Just absolutely excited to see them get that win last week. But the big flashing red light that I would have if I'm Clay is a freshman quarterback threw for over 560 yards and set a school record last week. Landon Eckelberry's good. Not trying to take anything away from the young man. Looking forward to talking with Stephen Adams in the coming weeks about the progress that he's made. Is he 560 yards setting school records good? I don't know. And that's the big question I would have for my defense if I'm Clay, is we just gave up a lot of passing yards to a freshman who I would argue is probably not as experienced as TJ Tackett is for Perrysburg. I wonder, as you said, how does this defense hold up against that running game? But if I'm Dirk Connor, I'm coming out and I'm ready to throw the ball around a little bit because that Clay defense showed that it is vulnerable to the pass. So if Clay is going to get its second signature win, 2 things it has to do. It cannot allow Clay to have big play after big play down the field in the passing game. If they're able to control the running game to the best of their abilities and not allow those big pass plays like they did last week, I think they've got a shot. But Perrysburg's defense is really good. It's one of the best in the area. Like I said, Mike Ward, who's a former Toledo coach, does a great job with the scheming and what they do with that defense over at Perrysburg. It's going to be tough for Clay to pull off the upset, in my opinion. Perrysburg is probably a little bit better than what they have seen so far. But I think Clay could give them a run for their money in the right circumstances, but they have to have everything go right. So if I had to pick, I'd probably lean towards the Jackets in this one. But I think when you have Mason Heinzel, you don't necessarily count him out 100%.
And to make your point about that it would be probably a bigger signature win. As you take a look at the rankings, Clay comes into the week ranked 10th in Division II, Region 6. Perrysburg, 2nd in Division I, Region 1. So that would be a huge thing. Now, granted, coming into this after their loss, Findlay dropped all the way to 10 in the region. So the possibilities are certainly there.
Yeah.
So we just mentioned a little bit, 2 teams. Well, one team is definitely looking for something here. The winless Northview Wildcats head down to Bowling Green, coming off a blowout loss to Lima Senior a week ago. And it looks like the stars are aligning that they may go winless this season. In past years, this might have been what you could call a winnable game for them. However, that's going to be very rough, and it's all going to lean on whether or not they can stop that running attack of the Bobcats. So I guess it really is, can Northview slow down Shannon and Schaefer long enough to get a win here? Yeah,
that's the number one question. Can the Wildcats figure out a way to basically slow down the 2 backs from Bowling Green? Jay Shannon had a great weekend. Jackson Schaefer had a great weekend at Springfield. They were able to beat the Blue Devils. That's a good win for Bowling Green because they were able to get one of those Buckeye Division wins. And Bowling Green is probably on the other end of size that you would look for and seeing if you could have one of those games go your way. Bowling Green's going to control the clock. They're going to try and control the tempo and the pace of the game. You mentioned the winnable games. The last thing I would want to do if I'm Greg Silm over at Northview is put all of my eggs into I got to be able to beat Springfield. And that is what I would be really nervous about. This is one of those where if you're going to get a win and if you're going to beat a team, the schedule gets a lot harder from here if you're Northview. And then on top of everything else, you're going into the Buckeye Division, and the only game that feels like is even close to being a game they could be in is that game against Springfield. So if they don't win here, the only chance I really feel like, and it's not to certainly denigrate what Northview does. I mean, great guys, great coaches, but the opportunity to win a game, you don't want it to go by. So this is one that I feel like Northview has to have in a lot of ways. They're not going to probably win more than 2 games, but this is one where if you're going to get a win before you get to that Springfield game, this is the one I think you got to get. But and you have to be able to stop Jackson Schaefer. You have to be able to stop Jay Shannon, because if you're not, it's going to be a long night, and before you know it, you're going to be beat up, and the game's going to be over, and they're going to shorten that ball game too.
And we can make mention, too, as if things continue, Bowling Green sitting in a playoff spot right now, 12th in Division III, Region 10. Moving over to another game. And it's, speaking of, when we're not trying to denigrate what's going on for the Spartans, who come in at 2-2, but they have to travel to the undefeated Anthony Wayne Generals, sitting at number 5 in Division 2, Region 6, excuse me. The question I have, because I have to play devil's advocate in this role,
sure,
is there any possible way that Anthony Wayne gets caught looking forward, having to take on Whitmer and Perrysburg, and falls flat coming out against Start?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
No, I don't see it, and that's not to disrespect Start. Like you said, you're not trying to talk down about the job that Start has done. Congrats on getting the victory last weekend, but this was a game last year where Anthony Wayne had the Spartans, I think, at Anthony Wayne again last year. And this is kind of what you're looking for if you're Andy Brungard. It sets you up well to be healthy. Whitmer was able to come out after their game, which, again, we'll talk about in a moment, but their game against Southview last year, and they looked like a different team. It definitely kind of put the fear of God into Whitmer last year, where they went back to the drawing board a little bit after that game against Southview and changed some things almost fundamentally about where the focus was for that offense. They went from more balanced to very heavy on the run. And I thought that Eric Brown and Mike Williams and the staff in that offensive room did a really good job of coming up with some really effective running schemes that Whitmer was able to take and pull off 2 of the biggest wins that they had last year. The problem for Anthony Wayne is going to be keeping these guys engaged. You don't want to get anybody hurt. That's a big thing going into next week. You want to have everybody at 100% or as close as you can. My guess is Andy Brungard's going to hold guys that are on the fence and that aren't necessarily 100%. This is one where if you're looking for a game to really get right, this is the one where you're happy because you should be able to get this over by halftime. You should have a running clock in the second half, and you can kind of start looking forward to next week a little bit earlier than what Whitmer's probably going to be able to do on Friday.
We talked quite a bit about our next game earlier on with Chad Long, but Fremont Ross 1-3 on the season, hits the road to take on Findlay, also 1-3. So you mentioned Landon Eccleberry coming off that school, that record evening a week ago. So the question I think you have is, can Ross live up to that edict of no big plays and find a way to contain the freshmen? Because a win over Findlay would be, and I know we're halfway through, but this is the kind of stuff that's the stat my jam. So you've got to figure Ross would pick up a ton of computer points. Right now, they're sitting on just on the outside looking in Division II, Region 6 at number 17. There's no doubt that the win here would push them up into a playoff spot.
It would be absolutely huge, and it's one of those games where they have to figure something out on offense. And I appreciated how candid Chad was about the struggles offensively with that group and basically saying, we can't throw the football right now, and that's a problem. Now, you're going to miss Zaylen Harris. I think Whitmer, in a way, dodged a bullet last week by not having to face Zaylen Harris. And again, all I heard going into that game, as soon as I walked in the building on Friday, was, have you seen number 5 for them? Have you seen number 5? And honestly, I hadn't watched a ton of Zaylen Harris going into Friday last week, but you certainly piqued my interest because everybody talked about what a loss, what a huge impact that was going to have for Fremont Ross's offensive attack last week. And it was pretty evident. I have to say, apologize to Elijah Yesagari because I thought it was Yesquire. So apologies to him because I called him the wrong last name in the game last Friday. But with that said, he's going to have to be the guy that carries the load on in the run game. But they've got to get Carson Caden going. If you can't get the pass game going, they're going to really have a hard time. As Chad said, teams are loading the box against us. We got to be able to pass the football. On the Findlay side, it's, can the defense play? Can the defense limit the impact that Fremont Ross's offense has? Now, no disrespect to the Little Giants, that offense is not Clay's offense. They don't have the horses that the Eagles have on the offensive side of the football. But we also saw this Findlay team give up a lot of passing yards to Lima Senior a couple weeks ago. And that's not to say Lima Senior is not a good football team, but I would guess that if you had to put Lima Senior on par with Fremont Ross's talent, you probably would see two pretty equal teams. The beauty that Chad Long has going into next week is he almost has a blueprint of some of the things they need to do to be able to be effective against that Findlay defense. On the other side for Ross, you hit it on the head. Landon Eccleberry is not your average freshman. He's big. He's physical. He's got size to him. He's not somebody that's just going to kind of wilt under a big light moment down at Donnell Stadium. I agree with Chad Long. I said it last week with Clay. You didn't have to necessarily shut them down in every series, but you had to be able to get pressure on Landon Eccleberry to force him into freshman mistakes. That's going to be the case the rest of the year. It doesn't matter if you can argue, well, he's 6 games in. Well, it's still the 6th game for a freshman. Every week is a new experience. He's never done this thing before. And because it's not old hat, because every week presents you with a new challenge, a coach can argue, and my personal opinion, a coach can always argue, well, he's not a freshman anymore because we're so many games in. I don't buy into that because it's a new thing every week for that. So if you can put pressure on him, if you could show him a different look that he hasn't seen, you could confuse him, you might have a chance there. I'd probably lean Findlay if I were having to pick this game, but I think Fremont Ross, if they're able to control the tempo, they're able to move the football through the air a little bit and open things up for the running game, they've got a chance. That offensive line for Fremont Ross is big, and it is, like you said, 291 across the front. If you've got size up front, you should be able to provide enough time for guys to pass, guys to run. That's where it has to start for Fremont Ross, but they have to be able to throw the football, period.
Another matchup of a team that two teams looking to kind of turn things forward as they head into divisional play. Springfield coming in at 1-3. They go out to Napoleon, who are even up at 2-2. Now, this is a Springfield team that has already lost to Bowling Green. We talked about their running game just a minute ago. Napoleon is built in a similar way. They're a very tough team. They're a very gritty team, as we've mentioned a couple times as well. And it's also a team that hung with Anthony Wayne for a half a week ago. So I think the question is once again, it's along the same lines of starting Anthony Wayne. Can the Blue Devils slow that running game down enough to stay in this one and possibly turn a game that maybe wasn't initially thought as winnable into winnable for them?
Oof, that's a tall task, and I don't know. I look at Napoleon last week to hang with Anthony Wayne for a half. That might have been a group that learned the most about themselves last week, knowing that, and that's not to say Anthony Wayne didn't shoot themselves in the foot a little bit, but knowing that you hung with a team that is bigger than you, that in theory should have more talent than you, bigger guys, more resources, whatever you want to say. They hung with them for a half and really proved to themselves that they can play with a good football team that's bigger than them. That might have been a coach and a staff that learned more about themselves in a loss than any team in the state of Ohio last Friday. I think Napoleon is just too good. I really do. And that's not to say anything against LaCharles and his staff, but this is a Springfield team that lost to the Start Spartans a couple weeks ago. Napoleon's a better team than Start, hands down. I don't even think that's in a question at this point. This Napoleon team is one of my favorite teams. And you heard Chad Long say, and we had Steve on right afterwards, he feels like Napoleon's the better of the two teams right now. Southview was a small favorite in that Cardinal division. And Chad said, based off of what he's seen from Napoleon so far, you probably have to give the nod the other way now because of how good the Wildcats have been to start the year. I love when you have to go to Napoleon too. That is not an easy place to win. I can't see Springfield having enough to stop that rushing attack. And again, the play action game of Napoleon on top of it is as good as it gets at the high school level as well. They'll lull you to sleep and then they'll nail you with a play action pass. They're so good at that. I just don't see Springfield having enough in the chamber to take down Napoleon.
And as we mentioned with the rankings, Napoleon find themselves in a playoff spot in the first computer rankings, 13th in Division 4, Region 14. That finally brings us to our game this week as Whitmer welcomes in the Southview Cougars, a 2-2 team coming in. Whitmer Panthers 3-1. We talked a lot about everything surrounding the game last year and how it was a literal last second TD that gave Whitmer the win a year ago. Obviously, two different teams in two different places.
Sure.
And as you and Coach Hardy talked about, slowing Mo MacArthur down is going to be the key for the Panthers to continue their momentum even into an even bigger game the week before. But I guess can ask the same question that I asked about Anthony Wayne or Perrysburg. Could this be a case where Southview's talented enough to be this trap game for Whitmer?
I think it is because, and I think it was last year, because you're looking ahead to Anthony Wayne. Whitmer should, and I put should in bold, italic, underlined, should be able to come out with the way last year went on alert. And if you can't do that, they're in trouble. Ken Winter said something to me last week when we were talking about how the defense has played so far. And the one thing that has given him concern is the rushing yards against that he has seen. Now, you've had three really good running teams that you faced to start the year. Dublin Kaufman's quarterback was phenomenal. Amari Valerio Hudson. Then you had Central Catholic, who's got Tyler Morgan and all the other young man's names escaping me, but they had the duo tailback there. And then week number 3, You go up against Clay and Mason Heinchel, who we've already talked about his ability to extend plays, use his legs in the pocket, all that good stuff. He felt that it was skewed towards them looking like they weren't able to slow the run down. On the other side of that coin, though, it's going to look a lot better because I think it's skewed the other way after the effort against Fremont Ross last week because Little Giants were without Zaylen Harris. And I definitely think that helped the Whitmer stat line in the other direction. I don't know that Whitmer has seen outside of Central Catholic a football team that runs as well from the tailback position as what Southview will have going into this week. To be fair, they're going to see two really tough teams back to back after that. This 3-game stretch, it's really important for Whitmer to be good against the run. That's it. I don't even think, I mean, you want my preview for Anthony Wayne and Perrysburg? It's stop the run. That's it. If Whitmer's defense can stop Southview running the football, it puts a lot of pressure on Will Macy's. It puts a lot of pressure on that Southview offense to be able to throw the football. Steve Hardy had said they lost receivers. Their guys have played well, and they've gotten better as each week goes on. But if you can make Southview one-dimensional, that's going to help your situation. Where Whitmer got into trouble last year, I felt like, in that game against Southview, was the fact that Isaac Sexton became a weapon in the passing game because Whitmer started to have to overplay the run. And there were a couple of plays, I don't know if you remember this late, the one play that Steve referenced was the slip and fall by the Southview DB, and then Logan Frank took the pass in for a touchdown. But there was a play on the previous series when Southview had the football where they ran like a wheel route out of the backfield to Isaac Sexton that Will Macy's just overthrew, like super close. And if he catches that, it's a first down, and might have been ball game at that point. That was the one play or another play that if Whitmer's not careful, they could be in trouble. Last week, Mo MacArthur caught a 68-yard touchdown pass from Will Macy's in the Perrysburg game. That was their only offensive points. Do not underestimate how good of a team Southview is, even with the injuries, even though maybe they're younger, they lost the 30 seniors, whatever that may be. That's a team. Steve Hardy always has his guys ready to play. Whitmer has to be ready for that. And it's kind of like I said to Ken Winters last week. You looked at going to Fremont as a business trip. It's got to be the same thing on Friday. You have to come out, have to be ready to play. Good teams, when they come out of the locker room, are locked in, they're dialed in, and they're ready to go. The other thing that has bothered me also the last couple of weeks with Whitmer, their approach out of the locker room in the third quarter. We've seen 2 back-to-back weeks that have been lackluster after halftime. Haven't seen them look the sharpest. So I am concerned about that a little bit. Ken Winters, I'm sure, concerned about that as well. Whitmer, if that's as Steve said, if you get to the second half, Whitmer has to be ready to come out in that third quarter, because last 2 weeks it has not looked very good coming out of the locker room, and you're gonna have to play a full 4-quarter game at some point. Whitmer hasn't had to do it a whole lot other than that game against Central Catholic. For the most part, it's been game over by halftime. Even the Dublin Kaufman game, yeah, it was 28-14, but it felt like Whitmer was in control of that football game. They have to be ready for a 4-quarter game on Friday, or it could be a close one again.
To steal Coach Hardy's line, you can't let them get back on the bus at the half. And
right.
Try to drag them off in the third quarter. And it's interesting to say that Central game was the only game where they didn't have that first drive coming out of the third quarter, that first time they had the ball, where it looked like they were just kind of – it took a second to get back up into gear.
They were engaged out of the locker room in that Central game, and you're right. Yeah. That's the one. But Ken Winters shouldn't have to have his team down by a touchdown in order to feel engaged coming out of the locker room. You have to be able to do that. And that's the difference with this Whitmer team. And not to get on a big, long Whitmer rant here, but that's the fine line that we've talked about with this Whitmer team the last couple of weeks, which is they have a chance to be good, but they also have a chance to be really good. And that line between good and really good is not very big, but it's the little things. It's being mentally engaged. It's being ready to go. It's watching film outside. It's doing all the little things that it takes to be a championship kind of team. And what I hope this team is recognized, and we won't know it necessarily until after Friday, and you might even be able to argue we won't know it for another 3 weeks. But what I hope this team learned after that Central game is as we said, the margin for error in games against good teams is handful of plays. You got to be darn near perfect in those games. But the other thing is they should come out of that game knowing how special they can be, but they have to be able, they have to lock in and do those things that make them special.
It is a game you'll hear right here across Northwest Ohio, live on Q105.5, 6:30 pregame with a 7 o'clock kickoff from Whitmer Memorial Stadium.
Looking forward to that one on Friday. That will do it for us on NLL Weekly. Again, as you know, you can watch us every Wednesday night. We tape around 7 o'clock. Watch us live on YouTube. It's archived there. Search NLL Weekly. You can look us up there. Watch the video broadcast if you want to, or if you're more of an audio file, you can listen to us on Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Spreaker, and Podcast Addict. And you can also hear us on, hopefully soon, Apple Podcasts as well. We're going to keep working on that. But again, you can get us just about anywhere. Do appreciate the time. Really appreciate Chad Long. Really appreciate Steve Hardy. I don't think you could find two better guys to come on. This league is so great with the coaches. Like I said, we haven't had one yet where we're like, man, that wasn't – I love talking football with these guys, and it's been fun over the last couple of weeks to do that. And nice thing is we still got 5 more weeks after this to do it. So I'm excited about talking more football with some of the coaches around here. So thanks to those guys. Thanks to Car Stereo One. Thanks to Victory Automall. We appreciate them. Also want to give a shout-out to Sideline Sports Eatery. They're a sponsor as well. They are one of the best places to go watch college pro football this weekend. 7 locations around Northwest Ohio. Terrific food, drink specials, all that stuff. Eric Sitter and his team at those sidelines do a great job. So make sure that you head there if you're looking for a place to watch the big game this weekend. So that'll do it for us here on week number 5 of NLL Weekly. We will see you in week number 6. Until then, have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.